Welcome to the Jones Zone, a podcast by Darryl and JJ Jones.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jones Zone. Today, we are lucky to have Kenneth Carson. He's a homeowners insurance agent.
Thanks so much for having me. My name is Kenneth Carson. I'm right here in the California region. I work for an agency called Comparion Insurance Agency, but we're simply the exclusive broker channel that was created by Liberty Mutual.
But are there any solutions like that are coming up where you could just limit one particular insurance company's liability so they're not responsible for anything other than fire?
What you're asking is really creative. And we've even talked about how do we model things. We just a few minutes ago were referencing some of the natural disasters in other states. Those other states have what's referred to as a hurricane deductible. So in the event one of those types of catastrophes hits, that homeowner is now responsible for a much larger deductible. That makes it a little bit more user-friendly for those insurance companies to say, okay, we think we can open up a little bit more exposure, knowing that if it's one of those situations, we're on the hook for a little bit less and the consumer's got more skin in the game. So why not a wildfire deductible? Nobody seems to have thought of that here in California. That could possibly be a solution where maybe one of the big home insurance players decides, well, if a wildfire comes through and we can't make the decision to just back completely off of it, what if we separated and had a deductible that was accounting for just that type of loss? And if that buyer or that homeowner's got more skin in the game, maybe a $10,000 deductible versus a $500, then maybe we're willing to open up more exposure, and perhaps those wildfire maps that you're talking about get a little bit smaller because they've got a little bit more in terms of financial resources should one of those catastrophes happen. That is a solution that I think could be on the radar, but it's going to take a lot of attention. And honestly, these insurance policies, they're legal contracts. So you're talking about having to revamp an entire legal contract for an entire industry in an entire state to incorporate that. But that could be a possible solution. So I like your question. It's creative, and it does bring up a thought process that a lot of us have had.
And you answered my next question, which was, what are the typical deductibles? So I guess I should know this, or maybe I shouldn't. The typical edit moment there, Jeremy. Typical deduction would be around $500 now currently, and then the thought process for example, you brought up hurricanes. Theirs are 10,000, or do you know? I mean, I don't expect you to know.
Yeah, it's because I oversee 3 states. So I have California, Nevada, and Hawaii. Hawaii has a separate windstorm or hurricane deductible, which we can set much higher, like $10,000, or we can even set as a percentage of the dwelling coverage. So if you have $1 million home and you put a 20% deductible, that's a gigantic number that you can be on the hook for before the insurance company comes in and saves the day for the rest of it. So yeah, that can change as far as the wildfire deductibles go. But with respect to your question about what are the most common deductibles that we see right now, typically we see those around 1,000. In fact, we're starting to see them increase, where to make the home insurance more affordable, a $2,500 deductible seems to be the new standard. And that gets that pricing into a bit more of a sweet spot where we're seeing folks who are now dealing with these larger interest rates qualify a little bit easier when we can alleviate some of the pricing. And the easiest way to do that on the insurance side is with that deductible.
The funny part too is no matter what the insurance companies and the politicians agree on, the lender's a third player on this. They have to be okay with it.
So and I mean, they're going to have the last word. You're absolutely right. And if that, what we're seeing now is yet another brand new issue where after some of these major financial losses have occurred and the payout has not been satisfactory to the consumer, at least in the eyes of Department of Insurance, we're now seeing the credit rating for some insurance companies be decreased. And lenders don't like that. Lenders own that home until that mortgage is paid off. And until that mortgage is paid off, that contract is going to read a certain way with certain requirements that cannot be flexed on. And one of them is the financial strength of the company that's protecting that house, which is the insurance company. So yet another issue that's come to light is the credit rating on some of the insurance companies and the lenders and the underwriters and their reaction to it, saying, if that company is not financially strong, maybe we don't trust them. and you need to get another company.
Let's take another turn. What I had a fire marshal on my show. It was a great show, and she had mentioned technologies. She mentioned drone technology to help with the wildfires. I also had heard recently about one of the insurance, and probably all the insurances now requiring, it's around a $500 technology that will detect leaks immediately. Am I making sense at all? Has this come to you know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about? So are there, besides that, maybe you can touch on that a little bit. Are there any other technologies that are coming into play that will help mitigate these issues?
Yeah, we're seeing some of the credits that are getting a bit creative. And once again, going back to the very beginning, insurance companies operate on data. And so when I was a claims adjuster, the most common claim that was filed was under a category called water non-weather, which is essentially a plumbing issue. And so if you go on vacation for a couple days, or if you go to work for the day and the toilet starts leaking the moment you left, you're coming home to the entire first floor of your home completely flooded. And so the insurance companies have reacted to that. Once again, they've got all of this data that they've tracked. And some are now saying, in order to insure your home, we want confirmation that you have a leak detection apparatus fixed to your service line with perhaps a remote app that can be monitored. So in the event a leak is detected inside your home, that valve is immediately shut off, minimizing the damage to your home, minimizing the amount that us insurance companies are on the hook for in the event that claim is filed, which is going to be the second you walk in and step in a puddle of water. So very similar to that, we are seeing some other creative avenues that the insurance carriers are looking at. But you mentioned something very specific. You talked about aerial shots or drone photos and drone technology with respect to wildfire resolution. Those exact same aerial photos are now being used on the front end when it comes to the insurance underwriting. So when I was a claims adjuster, if a hurricane came through one of my states, I had no home to visit to analyze the square footage, the roof shape, etc. But we did have a third party vendor that was in charge of taking aerial photos and canvassing entire zip codes. Now the insurance companies are using those photos on the front end or even at renewal to say that you've got a roof in poor condition, or you've got a ton of giant trees that are overhanging that roof and we need you to address that. So the technology can work both ways. It can work for us as a consumer to help prevent large losses. It can also work against us when I get this letter in the mail that says, we saw a tree because we have an aerial photo of your home. We don't like it. You need to fix it, or you need to go to another carrier.
Well, and so that's pretty good. How about, let's flip that on this side also. Are there, on that note, are there things that one could do for their house to help it get insured? Meaning, yeah, maybe you do remove trees. Where am I going with this? In other words, Jeremy, you might have to edit this. Let me get my hamsters rolling here. Are there measures that one? Okay, Jeremy, let's go back in. Are there any measures that a homeowner can do to cause their house to become? I mean, you talked about things that they may have to do. Are there any measures that you can even go beyond that to make it become more insurable, and where an insurance company is going to look at that and go, by golly, I love what you've done there. You've encased your eaves. You've removed all dry brush. You've got all cement. Your whole house is made of cement. I'm kind of exaggerating for a point, though. Are there things that a homeowner could do, or is that still in the kind of development stage? Is that talked about, or does it already exist? Talk about that.
Yeah, good question. And that's kind of a three-part answer, because it used to be a thing, then it was all but removed, and now it's becoming a thing again. So when we're talking about the insurability of a home, let's just say, for example, at the very beginning, at the stage that I'm purchasing a home, whether it's what the seller did or what I can do preventatively to make a home more insurable with, in the eyes of the particular carrier. In the past, every case could be analyzed. And when you're looking at case by case, me and my neighbor could have two very different situations on the exact same street because I've cleared trees away from my home. I've cleared bushes from away from the front of the property. I've got a tile roof versus his or her wood shingles from the 1980s. And so, case by case, the insurance company is going to love the situation that I'm in versus the risk that my neighbor's in. Now, as some of these events have unfolded and the insurance companies have panicked, they have now taken off that case by case approach, and they're just looking from the top down at entire zip codes. And so now, regardless of what I may do versus my neighbor next door, the same insurance company could say, you're in the exact same zip code. We want none of you. And now, as we're starting to evolve, again, we're seeing that California Fair Plan does take some of those things into consideration: the double pane windows, the enclosed eaves, the brush cleared for a certain amount of distance from the closest portion of my home. Absolutely. But think again, California Fair Plan is handling just wildfire losses. So it's in their best interest to keep those as data points to help. The other insurance companies, though, it'll probably be a long time before they can start talking about credits and discounts again, when right now they're just struggling to stay in the state.
What are the most common mistakes homeowners are making right now when buying homeowner insurance?
Great question. So I think one of the most common mistakes we're seeing is the assumption that a carrier is going to be available. In the past, I think you mentioned it at the very beginning when we first started today, was, you've been able to 48 hours before the home closes, call your car insurance company. The agent will put together a home insurance policy, and overnight that thing is done and it's in place. It's simply not the case anymore. And one of the biggest mistakes that we're making is the assumption that the environment is still the same. Now, some of us haven't purchased a home in 20, 25 years. And so the market is much different now. And one of the best things that you can do is, as you are entering contract, or if you're even looking at specific addresses, check with your insurance resource to make sure that house is insurable. Because the biggest mistake you can make is the assumption that a home is insurable, and you're going to fly through that contract and those keys are going to be waiting for you at the end without any issues at all.
That's good advice. I mean, that's basically what we've been forced to do. So, and let me ask you too about claims, because I had this just come up. Now, I know that challenges arise when there's when the house has had a claim, a recent claim. Let's first define recent. What do you guys? Sorry to throw you in the bunch of those guys, but yeah, I mean, it's what do insurance companies consider a recent claim? So, meaning if it happened obviously a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, hey, this is something that the new insurance company is going to factor in, the new buyer in this case. When does it fall off the record?
Good question. And this is state specific, but for California, that's a 5-year history. So when we're running quote requests through all of our carriers, these companies are going back 5 years. Some of them may inquire further than that, but in California, that standard tends to run at the 5-year mark. And they're not only looking at claims history underneath the buyer at perhaps their previous residence, because that could be an indicator.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
So because not only is it stay with the home, but it's also the person. So go ahead and I'm sorry, continue.
That's right. No, so it's also following the buyer. So as a buyer, have I demonstrated, or I should say as an insured, have I demonstrated this history of filing small claims? Because here's a good example. My aquarium fell over and it caused damage to my carpet. I have a low deductible. I'm just going to call my home insurance company, get $500 and have the carpet fixed, not knowing that history is going to follow me for 5 years as a pattern working against me as a consumer. But now we're also looking at the home, and the insurance carriers, to cover their own butts, they're saying, has there been a plumbing loss on that home in the last few years? Has there been a roof damage claim in the last few years? And if so, can you at least show us the documentation that confirms that damage was fixed? Because why would we want to put ourselves on the hook for the next plumbing loss and $30,000 check that we can see that previous company paid out? So at least show us the issue has been resolved, and then we're probably okay with it. But if that consumer, if that new buyer has this track record of plumbing claims and theft claims, then that's probably a level of risk that the insurance company doesn't want to deal with.
What exactly does standard home insurance cover? And more importantly, what isn't covered that surprises a lot of people?
Great question. This lets me put on my claims adjuster hat again, but I'll say that there's a little PTSD from working in that department. So I'm only going to put this on for a minute, and then it's gone again. But the most common things that you're going to see, essentially in California, we have a standard, what's called an open peril policy, which means if there's damage to the home, we're going to cover it, with the exception of a few of these issues. So you've got fire damage, you've got weather damage, you've got water damage from plumbing. All of that, for the most part, is going to be covered, minus whatever your deductible is. But there are a couple of those hidden bombshells that a lot of folks are surprised are not covered. Most of them have to do with long-term issues. And the easiest way to deal with this is to kind of parallel it with car insurance. This kind of helps to explain it a little bit. But I got a lot of folks when I was a claims adjuster who were furious when their air conditioner went out. It was 105 degrees outside. They called us at the home insurance company and said, I need a new $8,000 AC. You're my home insurance. You pay for it. And I had to explain to them that that's a maintenance issue. That is a long-term wear and tear issue. And insurance companies are not in the business of handling stuff that perhaps a home warranty would. And the easiest way to parallel that is, do you call your car insurance when your Toyota's air conditioner goes out? You don't. If you had a warranty, absolutely, the warranty company can handle that. And that same logic applies to the home. But a lot of consumers are surprised when they call for wear and tear issues and they realize, oh, wait a second, I'm the homeowner. It's actually my responsibility to maintain my home. And the insurance company doesn't come to the rescue and just give me a new roof because one is old, or just give me a new air conditioning system because it's old. And that tends to be a big one. And it takes a lot of explaining. Still not a fun conversation to have, though.
Well, I can tell you've explained that before you because you came up with a great way to explain it, paralleling it with car insurance and air conditioners. What came to my mind was earthquake. That's an additional insurance. That's not covered under your standard policy. What is there? And I don't even know if you'll be able to answer this question with so little information, but what are earthquake insurance coverage? What does that typically cost? And I don't know if I tell you a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2-bath home in Orange County, if that's enough information for you to give kind of a approximate quote for earthquake insurance.
Yeah, that's great information. Now, all of it's going to vary because of deductibles, et cetera, and the area, whether it's Orange County East or West or North or South, because all of that can determine, because you've got your fault lines throughout California, and it's going to be zone specific. But thank you for mentioning earthquake, because that's another one that we need to realize that in standard home insurance in California, number one, earthquake, and number two, flood. Those two have to be purchased as supplemental policies if you're in a zone that's concerned with both of those types of incidents. Now, earthquake coverage, absolute standard for my Bay Area residents and my Southern California residents. And those are all going to be price specific. So if you're looking at your standard single family home, but you're in the metro area of LA, let's just remind ourselves of the Northridge earthquake, and you can essentially deal with a total loss just like a fire. Well, the pricing structure is going to reflect that. It's going to reflect where that risk is. I can have that same exact home in Sacramento, California, which is not susceptible to earthquake damage, and an entire year's worth of earthquake coverage is going to be $250. We move that home into the Bay Area or in Metro LA or Orange County even, and now that same exact policy is $1,500 to $2,500 with the exact same type of coverage, the exact same square footage home. So the earthquake coverage and flood is all zone specific, and it's determined by where we know that data is. If you're right next to a levee, absolutely, flood insurance is going to look a certain way versus if you're higher up the hill, not near any waterways. That same treatment goes with the earthquake coverage too.
This may not be a question for you. It could be a question for a lender, but I'm wondering if lenders are factoring, because I haven't seen this, where lenders will go, hey, you're in an earthquake fault zone. You need to get earthquake insurance. I haven't seen that. Have you seen that at all?
Not at all. And
Okay.
That's a big concern, because what that means is you've got one of the biggest risk factors that California is known for, and the vast majority of the homes that are in those regions are not protected against it. Now, what we used to see in the claims department, we weren't so much concerned with earthquake coverage. What we ended up being concerned with is what we referred to in that department as concurrent causation. There's going to be a final exam on that vocabulary word after this. But what we referred to is the resultant fire. So when you have the earthquake damage and perhaps a natural gas line breaks, and now you have a resultant fire, those insurance companies are still on the hook for that resultant fire, even though the primary cause may have been the earthquake incident that started prior.
Hold
So,
on, back up.
yeah,
Really?
yes, concurrent causation. It was my vocabulary word, and now I want to throw this claims hat off forever because I don't want to talk about it anymore. But
But there are also technologies, because I think I'm thinking of a gas shutoff valve and things like that
right,
that will help mitigate or keep that from happening.
yep. And that could be for a newer neighborhood that's perhaps built up to current code, but you're looking at a lot of California construction that is not on 2025 building code. And those services under the ground, we had a fire in the Bay Area in Northern California. That was a result of an earth movement incident and a gas line broke. And when that explosion happened, now you've got companies on the hook for that resultant fire. So you've got to be careful. Now, companies may try to draw that line differently, and that could be carrier specific, but it is something that I dealt with. And on the claim side, we're supposed to be moving towards the area where coverage is going to be triggered. And we are certainly not looking for a way to reject anything, although the opinion could be different based on certain homeowners. But we've got to err towards the side of coverage. And that was a big one, is concurrent causation. So the fire after the earthquake.
Kenneth, this has been fantastic. I want to ask you one last question. What advice would you give homeowners who have had their insurance canceled? What do they do?
I love how you give me the most difficult question to wrap this thing up, because we've searched for those answers. I've been to town hall meetings with Department of Insurance, where they've taken place in local regions where half the audience has their cancellation notices in their hand. And if you think these consumers haven't searched for the top 10 ways to figure out how to resolve the issue, then it was a little bit of an insult in some of those town halls to present that as a possible option. So I would say, if you receive one of those notices, first off, from now on, start paying attention to the mail that's got your company logo on it, because it's not all junk mail anymore. Some of that can be some important info. And we are required as carriers to send out non-renewal or cancellation notices with at least a decent enough window of time for you to be able to react. So if you do get a non-renewal notice 60 to 90 days out, you got to start searching early. Use the resource that you have that insured the home from the beginning. Start there, because there's a good chance their company evolved just like ours did, and they perhaps have other options and they're not locked into one provider. That's step number one. Step number two is take a look out for a local broker that's in your region, because what we're finding is that some of our big brokerage firms are not given access to some of these carriers that can be location specific. So if you're in Orange County, for example, and you've received this notice, perhaps look for an Orange County brokerage agency, because they might have access to companies that the big players don't. And finally, if you've got to research it, get a hold of someone who has access to California Fair Plan. And by now, all the broker agencies do. Know that that's going to be your last resort. And we're going to try door number one and door number two first. But if you need to be prepared for door number three, you better be prepared early, because it can impact your mortgage. It can impact your household budget. And it can impact you with the decision as to whether or not you even want to insure that home. We did talk about that at the beginning. If that loan is paid off, technically there's no requirement, but is that a decision that you need to make?
Yeah, I sold a house recently. In fact, the first time in 35 years, where he hadn't had it insured for 7 or 8 years. I first, my mouth dropped open. I thought, well, lucky you. You just saved yourself a fortune. So, all right. Well, Kenneth, you've been absolutely a wealth of information. So I'm so grateful for you being here and letting our audience know all your wisdom. Let's give your information out in case anybody wants to talk to you directly. What's the best way? A phone number, an email address? What will you tell us?
Yeah, easiest one. So for me, once again, my name is Kenneth Carson. I oversee 3 states, California, Nevada, and Hawaii. But for the purpose of today, best contact number for me is going to be 916-850-1234. 1161. That's to me and my entire team in our California office. And yeah, we're happy to help as an extension of your team.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it. Everybody, hope you enjoyed this, and please chime in if you have any questions and we'll try to get back to you. So take care now. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.